Hello everyone, it's Livia here, aka Story Minded, and I'm back with another book recommendation video. I finally got around to reading this Stardust by Neil Gaiman, and as many of you, if you've stumbled across my videos before, I've probably mentioned Neil Gaiman in at least one of my videos because he's one of my all-time favourite authors, and I'm determined to try and read every single work of his. Stardust, this is a very rare time where I discovered that I watched the film before I read the book. I can't even remember when the film came out, but it was many years ago. It's an amazing film. I highly, highly recommend the film Stardust. But I finally had the chance to read the book, and I picked this up a while ago when I walked in on my local library that I hadn't visited in so long, and I found, they were giving away free books, and Neil Gaiman, even better. So picked up Stardust, and I'm really glad I did. The prose is elegant. It's a fairy tale for adults. And it was quite interesting because I had a little look online to see some of the reviews that on Goodreads that some people had left about it. And there was a particular review that I stumbled across, which was really interesting because, and everyone, obviously, reading subjective, like many different subjects, reading is subjective. Not everyone is going to enjoy a particular book, and that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. But what I found quite odd about this particular review is that someone was really angry that in this book Neil writes about sex between different characters, because our main protagonist is born of a fairy woman, fae woman, however you want to refer to her. She's not of this world, and a human. And this reviewer seemed irate at this, and was very sort of harsh about the whole idea of fairy tales and how they shouldn't contain these things. But if you look into the history of fairy tales, and I always forget the male French author's name, but fairy tales were never originally written for children. Fairy tales were never ever written with happy endings in mind. That wasn't their purpose. The origins of fairy tales are a lot more sinister and darker, especially during the kind of Victorian period, and I'm thinking of like the Brothers Grimm, who came later on. Original fairy tales and across, different cultures and backgrounds, they are dark. They're full of gore. They're full of sex. They're full of revenge. They're tragedies, and this of Stardust very much captures this kind of spirit of the original fairy tales. Although it does have quite a bittersweet ending, I would say. I don't want to spoil the ending, but it does have a very bittersweet ending. In terms of the plot, I personally prefer, this is like one of those rare occasions where I do actually prefer the movie plot compared to the book, but that doesn't diminish the book in any way. It was just really interesting, having seen the film first, to see the differences and the comparisons between the book and the film. There's, like, for example, in the film Stardust, there's no appearance of this, I can't remember his name from the book, but there's this almost like hedgehog-esque / porcupine kind of man that Tristan meets in the forest that he goes through, and the kind of overall premise of this book is Tristan, who is Dunstan Fawn's son, ends up leaving his hometown of Wool. This book itself is set in the early Victorian period. He leaves his hometown of Wool on a kind of foolhardy quest, because he wants to impress this young woman he loves called Victoria, who's his heart's desire. And she sort of promises him, I'll give you my heart's desire if you go and get me. They see a shooting star, a falling star, and Tristan's like, she's like, oh, go bring me that star, as a joke. Tristan, bless him, with his hormones, is like, yeah, I'll go do that for you, and goes off on this adventure, only to find when he meets the star, she isn't just a lump of rock from space. Not very scientific with terms, but she's not this matter from space. She is a walking, talking human being. and so ensues a very comical and interesting story between him trying to get this star back to the one he truly loves. But I definitely recommend. Oh, and there's also Sky Pirates. If what I've said so far is not enticing you, there are Sky Pirates in this story, which is just amazing. Sadly, they don't get as much of a feature as they do in the film. They really developed the Sky Pirates in the film, and they capture lightning in the sky, and it's just really cool. So I do highly recommend the film, but I also recommend the book. It's still beautifully written. There's a lot to enjoy, and there's witches who are like the main one of the main antagonists in this book. And once again, I feel like the witch sisters, are much more fleshed out in the film. But yeah, it's just a really delightful fairy tale. So if you enjoy fairy tales and you appreciate the darker side of them, because as I say, originally fairy tales were very sinister, and they only started to morph as we move through the Victorian period into becoming more like moralistic tales for children, trying to keep them on the straight and narrow. For example, like Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, which is sort of like very satirical and sort of makes fun of decorum and everything like that, was still trying to reinforce those proper practices. I use quotation marks because it's very nationalistic, but that was the norm of the time. So yeah, it's just really interesting when you sort of have a little look online to see other people's opinions, and you just sort of sit there and you think, but they weren't meant to be happy. They're not meant to be happy endings. Fairy tales only became that later on, and especially in our era of everything being Disneyfied, fairy tales tend to have happier endings, but that wasn't the case back then. Anyway, if anyone's watched this, thank you for listening, and happy reading. Bye.